Good morning and welcome to Be in the Spotlight. And today my guest is Stephen Welch. And Stephen, if you'd like to introduce yourself to us guests and viewers, that would be much appreciated.
Hi, Sue. Thanks very much. My name is Stephen Welch. I'm a director of Archetypical, and I focus on a couple of key areas, which is really about helping people to make an impact. Part of what I do is training through business simulations in games, and the other part of what I do is presentation skills training and coaching to help people either for formal presentations or, for job interviews or things like that. And I think that's what we're here today to talk
Yeah,
about.
it is great. That is, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I really sort of wanted to take the viewers on a sort of a journey because I'm very much about building confidence, skills and knowledge and getting confidence to use tech, which covers such an awful lot of
Mhm.
things. And I think you and I met through the presentation area. So I just wondered if you would mind sharing us with your journey, how you achieved mastering your presentation skills. What challenges did you face in that journey, and how have you overcome them to become the sort of the lead presenter in what you're doing today?
Yeah. So I remember my very first presentation in grade seven when I was 12 years old. And we had to do a presentation in front of the class. And I stood at the wall. And in fact, I had one leg up on the wall, trying to kind of almost hide, even though it was nowhere to hide, and kind of read out from a script. And, we were only 11 or 12, but I remember that very clearly because that was my kind of first experience. But I did enjoy it and I did like doing those types of things. And so that was really powerful beginning experience, but I was quite terrible as a presenter. And I think one of the things I talk about when you're presenting is if there's two of you, quite often the second person is the more junior person and is kind of an assistant or does a tiny bit of it. And so I started doing little presentations like that where my boss would do most of it, and then I might do 5 minutes at some point. And I think in most business presentations, the audience wants you to succeed.
Mm,
So, you have a chance to do a bit of practicing and admit even sometimes that, you're part of your journey. And now, as a more senior person, when I'm presenting with more junior people, I'll say, here's Monica. And this is her third time presenting, but I really want you to support her. And I think one of the things that's really important is to support each other when you're presenting as a co-presenter. And that really helped me in my journey when more senior people were supporting me at the beginning of my career.
yeah, they're so good, and there's a lot of focus I've noticed on social media at the moment about talking on the big stage and getting these speaking gigs, and I'm thinking, wow, that seems to be the pressure now, do it, aim for these big talking things. But I think which brings me on to the next thing about actually overcoming your nerves to be able to deal with that type of thing. So what would you say were some of the practical strategies that you recommend for managing anxiety for public speaking
Yeah.
or interviews?
Well, I think I will answer that question, but to go back to your point about the big gigs, um, sure, that's great, but I think there are two flaws to, trying to focus too much on that. One is if you're going to do that, you need a plan to turn that into real career or business opportunities, depending on your point of view. And a lot of people don't have that. The second thing is, those things get a lot of publicity, but they're really a minority of business presentations. Most of the time, we're in a room with 5 or 10 other people,
Mm,
or we're having an interview where we're doing a mini presentation, or there's some kind of small gathering.
mm,
So it's easy to get worried and concerned about, I could never stand in front of a stage of 2,000 people and do what these experts do. And,
mm,
they are experts. But, you go to a movie and you never think to yourself, well, I got to be an Oscar winner actor straight away.
mm,
So if those things are really enjoyable to you, then go for it. But actually, the majority of what we do is the smaller scale
mm,
presentations where, in general, the audience is on your side.
mm.
To answer your question about nerves, I think I would say there are probably two key things. One is breathing.
Yeah.
So, before you go on stage, take a few deep breaths.
Mhm,
Um, In fact, there's three key things. So breathing is one, and the second one it would be to try to get to the room as early as possible
Yeah.
to familiarize yourself with what's going on and resolve any technical issues.
Yeah.
Um, the third point, I think, is something which I learned quite recently. So, at the beginning of my career, before mobile phones, you go to a client and there'd be a reception area and you'd sit and wait, and there'd be a bunch of newspapers.
Mm.
So you just read the newspapers, and these were the big papers like the Times and
Yeah.
the Financial Times. So you sit there, and I'm just going to unblur for a second. You'd sit there and you'd have your arms out like this, reading the paper.
Mm.
Okay? And what that does is really opens up your chest and your diaphragm and straightens your posture and you feel bigger. Whereas what happens nowadays is you go to a meeting, you waiting outside, and you have your phone. So you're looking at your phone and your posture is really closed down, and that
Yeah.
restricts and sort of minimizes you. So my trick is, if there's no newspaper, just pretend there is,
Yeah.
or stand up and walk around, or do something to fill
Yeah.
the space a bit more.
That's a really good tip actually, and you've got a really good point there because you do um yeah, your head's down. It's all that, it's not good for your posture or anything like that. So that's a really good tip. I hadn't even thought about that one. That was really good. Well done. Thank you for that. Well, that actually leads very nicely into the preparation techniques that we use. So we've sort of talked a little bit about it just then, but what key elements do you think individuals should focus on when preparing for a presentation or for an interview?
Yeah. So I'm working with a client now, and their big challenge is that, in this organization, people say, "Oh, I've got a presentation. Great. Let me turn PowerPoint on and start making some slides." And I think a lot of people do that. And I must admit, I've fallen into that trap from time to time. What I would say is before you open up your computer or start making slides, just sit back and think, what are the objectives
Mm,
and who is my audience?
yeah,
And objectives fall into kind of three levels, really. One is what is your audience's objective? What do they want from you?
yeah,
And then second might be your organizational objectives, if appropriate. And third is your individual objectives. So I just sit back and just think about, why are we doing this presentation? And to ask, why am I doing the presentation? Now, obviously, if you're presenting for a job interview, it's obvious why you are the one doing it.
mm,
Um, but if it's a more of a corporate presentation, just think about what is the special skill that you're bringing, which is the reason you are doing the presentation,
mm.
and being aware of that. And I think, thinking about the audience, the history, what they know about you, what you know about them, what's led up to this presentation, all of those things can help you think about, how to tailor your presentation to align to your audience's desires and objectives.
That's really good as well. Yeah, it's so important because you're right. So many people will just go straight into the presentation and think about it and just put the stuff in there. In fact, I would actually go as far as now it is a case of they'll use AI to create the presentation with not actually thinking anything more about it other than what AI does. And there's a lot of push going on that I've seen. I mean, I've tried it just to see
Yeah,
how it works from an experimental point of view. But the thing is, even if you do that, where's the personality in the presentation? And it's really is the delivery of you delivering the presentation that, and I've got that with the people that I teach in my building confidence course. Some of them don't make every session, and I will always send a copy of the presentation. But I always say you never know, if you don't attend the session, you won't know what I've got to say, and it will be different
yeah,
every time because
yeah, yeah,
it's the point of what you're doing, and you react to the class or the audience that you've got, and you tailor it. So although the slides are like the prompts, the person doing the talking is obviously doing the presentation, and that is
yeah.
completely different.
And that's
Um,
another thing to think about. One of my first presentation coaches that I had, his phrase was, if you're going to use visual aids, they must be visual and they must aid.
yes.
And so it's not a question of bullet points on the slide. It's a question of things that help illustrate your point. And so when I do this, I get in trouble because people will say, "Oh, can I have a copy of your slides?" "Oh, sure, here you go." And what they get is a bunch of pictures,
Yeah.
and they're totally lost.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I go to conferences or I speak at conferences, and they say, "Can we have your slides?" And I say, "I'm not going to use any slides." And that really baffles them as well.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, what? And they're saying, "Well, what about those people who weren't there?" And I said, "Well, that's their problem, not mine."
Yeah, no, it's true because you end if you end up with them on the slide, I end up reading the slides, so I'm going through what the slide says, which isn't great, but then I'll be adding more around it, so it's sort of like I know it's not a great thing to be doing, but I think, well, at least if there's anybody with the reading problems, which I do have in the class, they're hearing what it says, but you're adding more to it. But in a way, you are better off not having the presentation slides, and you're better off presenting what it is through the demonstration and explaining of what
Yeah,
it is that you're doing. Because I find, to me as the audience as well, I would be the person that wants to sit there and write everything that's down on the
yeah.
PowerPoint, and I'm taking more notice of the PowerPoint than I am listening because
Well, yeah. And there's a
it's
couple of challenges with that. One is, you know, it's great to put some bullet points in PowerPoint, but they're kind of your speaking notes, and the
yeah,
audience doesn't need to see them.
no, yeah,
The other thing that happens is that, if you put up 5 bullet points on a screen, the audience can read faster than you can talk them through. So
yeah,
they're reading point 5 while you're still talking about point 1.
yeah,
So when I do bullet points, and I'll give you a great reason to do them in a minute, but when I do them, I'll put them up one at a time.
yeah, I do, yeah, that's
Yeah.
totally what I do.
Um, and that's really good. That's the way to do it. I'm generally not a big fan of bullet points on slides, but my good reason for doing it is if you're presenting to people whose English, or let's say their language isn't necessarily the one that you're presenting in.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and therefore, there's lots of languages we can probably read and pick our way through, but actually if someone starts speaking, we're lost.
yeah,
So
yeah,
what I've done before is put my key messages on bullet points and just give people whose maybe English or French isn't their first language the chance to read them
yeah,
and process them and then
yeah.
move on.
Yeah, no, that's this good part. I have to say, not so much for French, but it's normally Hong Kong or Ukraine. A lot of my
Yeah.
target audience at the moment.
So they can read English, but sometimes they might lose the track when you're speaking. So that's a good reason
Yeah,
to put
yeah,
bullet points on a
yeah.
slide, but
That,
still one at a time.
yeah, and that's it. And that's the thing that really bugs me is when everybody has all of it go up on there at the time. So you end up, you are reading the slides and you're not listening because and what you'll also find is it's packed with information. There's so much text on there. So you're sitting there trying to read, and of course, then they finish talking and you haven't finished making the notes and it goes to
Exactly.
the next slide.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the other one that I think is awful is they've got the PowerPoint up there, but they stand in the middle of the presentation. So they're talking and they're standing in front of the PowerPoint. So you can't read what it says anyway, or they walk pace backwards and forwards over it. And yeah, I do
Yeah. Look, a
find
little bit of movement is okay, but one of the tricks of presenting and one of the reasons to get to the room early, like I mentioned before, is just to kind of work out where you're going to be and, where's do you have a clicker? Are you going to
yeah,
walk back and forth? Are you
yeah,
going to stay behind the podium?
yeah,
Are you going to sit down maybe?
yeah,
Um, and so, one of the concepts that I talk about is the concept of the single point of focus.
mm,
And what this means is you want to give your audience one thing at a time to focus on. So that might be the bullet point idea we talked about earlier. But it also means, if you're presenting, decide whether you want the audience to look at you or the screen.
mm,
And if you're, say, sitting down to present, you probably want the slides behind you
mm,
so that people can look in one place and see you and the
mm,
slides,
mm,
which means you won't be able to see them.
mm.
And so you have to know your content or have a little laptop. And a lot of people when they start presenting, they'll do this and look
Yeah.
at the slides and not the audience. So that's just something that you learn with practice.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you're right there.
Yeah,
So I think we've talked quite a bit about that, about the techniques that people can use to build their confidence with public speaking.
yeah.
What other tips would you get to give them to practice the skills for the everyday situations?
Find low risk environments. So, maybe there's little presentations you can do at a community club.
Mhm.
There's lots of speaking clubs that you can join, but even if you join, another type of club, you might get called on to give a little talk.
Mm.
So, I'm chair of Battersea Chess Club.
Oh, okay.
And the other day we had a grandmaster come along and give a lesson. And 5, 10 minutes beforehand, someone said, "Oh, well, Stephen, you're the chair. You should do a little welcome speech." I was like, "Okay." I didn't have any paper or anything, but I found an envelope, and it was literally the back of the envelope speech.
Yeah,
But it was kind of low risk situation, and I made a couple of jokes, and it was just a good way to practice.
yeah,
And if people didn't like it, it didn't matter. So find opportunities to practice
yeah,
in low risk situations.
yeah.
And the other thing I would do in terms of building your confidence is if you are invited to a big speech, rehearse.
Yes, yes. Yeah, 100%. I've got I twice recently. One I had to end up being interviewed for a film that was being made for a very big, well-known organisation in the UK, which I totally wasn't expecting. I went there as a volunteer to help out, which I normally do. Um, and there was film crew and everything there. And typically people that we were hoping turn up didn't turn up, so I had to sort of improvise and role play sort of straight away. And all I can say is thank God I've been teaching for so long and standing up in front of people, so even though
Yeah.
the thought terrifies me, I was sort of I literally on the top off the top of my head just
Yeah.
made up the speech and spoke.
Well, I think, you and I have enough experience that we can do that, in a reasonable job. Obviously, the ideal would be to have more preparation.
So yeah,
But, I think with some experience that can happen.
it,
But
it,
in general, what I would say is, rehearse and
yeah.
practice. The other thing that I think helps you is really the more you know about the context and your audience, the better.
Yeah, that's another good point. And one of the tips that I also get to my learners, because I actually, when I teach PowerPoint with them, I actually make them do the presentations as well. Whether it's in person, they use the smartboard, or if it's online, I'll get them to do a share screen and do a presentation that way. And I always make sure that we've got a few days or a week in between the sessions so that they've got time to practice and
Yeah,
prepare. But and even actually tips for interview preparing for the mock interview role plays. What I found that worked for me, and that I teach them to do, is to get the camera on on their phone or a tablet,
yeah,
and to do it as selfie mode and practice talking to it,
yeah,
and keep doing it that doing
yeah,
that with it so that it feels natural. And I suppose to a certain extent that's a little bit of what I've done with my social media journey, that I
yeah,
practice in the Facebook group first talking live to you and then working on from that, so it sort of helps build your confidence so that you
yeah,
are feeling more not self-conscious when you are talking on live and you've got
yeah,
problems with the tech going on around you. So
exactly.
yeah,
There's
um
a there's a great tool in PowerPoint. I think it's called Presenter Help or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
where you actually deliver the presentation and it more or less records you, and then gives you some feedback.
Yes, that's it. And I have got them to have a look at that. I've bought that up recently when I was sort of again experimenting with myself. So the thing with technology is there's always so much to learn, and it's when you start using it in a teaching it more, and
Yeah,
all right, how else, what else can
yeah,
we show? And it was interesting that the online version of the delivery of the course workshop was different to the in-person one, because
yeah,
we looked at some examples of good presentations, bad branding and stuff like that. So it had a different feel to it with it being
yeah,
online to the in-person one. So I think that which brings in nicely to the next question, which I wanted to talk about, engagement, audience engagement, which I think we've sort of been talking a bit about as we've been going through. But how can presenters effectively connect with their audience, do you think? And what techniques would you recommend for keeping your audience engaged?
Okay. So we've talked about doing your homework and your research. So the more you know about your audience and what they want, the better. Um, And sometimes, you know them really well. Other times you won't be able to find out very much about them. LinkedIn's a good source.
Mm,
What I would also do is encourage, where possible, to try to have a few phone calls with people in the audience to say,
mm,
what are you looking for from this presentation? Or if it's a job interview, talking to the recruiter and just trying to understand what are people looking for.
mm.
And what I would also do is think about what we call their desires.
Yeah,
And these, it is what people want, but it's also on a couple of different levels. So there's going to be their individual desires and
yeah,
their organizational desires.
yeah,
So, what do they want for their organization? What do they want for themselves?
yeah,
So for example, if you're going for a job interview, from an organizational point of view, they want a really great future star employee.
yeah,
From an individual point of view, probably want someone they can feel they can get along with.
yeah, yeah,
So you got to hit both of those points. The other element to consider is, there's going to be the kind of emotional desires and the rational desires.
yeah,
So you can always make yourself a little quadrant and say, what are the questions that are likely to pop up, or what are their desires in each quadrant: organizational, individual, rational, emotional,
yeah,
as those two axes.
yeah.
And then sort of fill in the squares to work out what's going on. And so that can really help. Um, and I think in terms of specific techniques during a presentation, it's about trying to vary your tone and your voice.
Mm,
It's about, having a duet with your slides almost. And that's a phrase I found out recently. There you are the star, the slides are there to help,
yeah, yeah,
not the other way around.
yeah,
And so the more you can vary your tone, sometimes moving about, sometimes turning off the projector and just talking,
yeah,
the better. The other thing that often happens when people write speeches is, they'll write something out, and we have a naturally more formal way of writing than we do speaking.
yeah,
We write in full sentences and paragraphs.
yeah,
They tend to be a bit long sentences sometimes.
yeah.
We quite often use long words in our presentations. That's not how we talk.
No.
It's quite weird when you meet someone who talks in complete sentences. So one of the things that I found really
Oh,
interesting
sorry,
was
sorry. Something's just burst out in noise in the background.
yeah. So one of the things I've discovered recently was a thing called Notebook AI. And what you can do is give it a bit of text, say a speech that you've written, and it'll turn it into a podcast. And it's maybe not exactly what you want, but it just gives you some inspiration to maybe make your content a bit more conversational. And so that's kind of useful tool, I think.
Okay, so yeah, that is really useful to again think about and um sorry, got distracted then. Yeah, it's really useful tips there. Thank you for that. Um, want to just focus a little bit on the actual tools now. Um, are there any digital tools or resources that you could recommend that would help improve presentation skills?
Well, we've talked about some of the features in PowerPoint. I just mentioned Notebook LM, I think it's called. Yeah, Notebook LM, which is very useful for turning your written text into slightly more conversational language.
Mm,
So that's quite a useful tool. Um, I think the most useful tool, to be honest, is not digital, it's rehearsing and practice.
mm,
And, it's also about what makes you feel comfortable.
yeah, yeah,
So um, you can certainly look at star presenters and try to comment and copy their approach, but if it's not you, you'll feel uncomfortable.
yeah,
So I think, practice, get to know your own style, use a bit
yeah.
of tools here and there, but it's really about you.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there about being yourself because there's so many people out there. And I can remember one of the things I got sort of told is, oh, look at who the big players are and follow them, copy them and be like them. But the thing is, you're not them. You are you. And I've really spent a lot of time, on myself and what I teach others to learn to be yourself. What is your new
Yeah.
unique sales pitch? Because at the end of the day, all the sales pitches are people buy from people, and people that they know, like, and trust. So how are they going to know, like, and trust you if you aren't you and you aren't yourself? And I think that is key to understanding yourself, believing in yourself. And my motto is about the beers, believing in yourself, embracing the technology, and excelling in your goals. Because I found that all while I was trying to do what everybody else was doing, what people were telling me to do, I wasn't succeeding. I was just getting more depressed or more, fed up with it. And then I switched off in the end. And then I started to actually believe in myself. I started achieving. And I think, it was growing in confidence for the education and training that I was getting, albeit from talking to other people, looking at stuff on the social media and YouTube, or, the different platforms. And it was finding out that. And then I think because I brought the knowledge that I'd got into the classroom, it was the questions that you were being asked in the classroom that perhaps you hadn't thought about, that people were asking you. And then when you realized that you actually had absorbed an awful lot of information, you're then giving that information and how much you've accumulated, and it's sort of, and then you're building their confidence and stuff with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really do feel that the technology that we've got out there is there to be used, and not to be afraid of it. And if we are afraid, that there's knowing that if you don't make a start, you aren't going to find the people that will be able to help you and build those relationships and stuff like that. So it's not all about buying and selling. It's also about networking and communicating and learning and developing that way. And I think that is something is also important to learn. And as I said, I think I said at the
Mm.
start of the interview, it was using that technology and finding a presentation that you did that introduced me to you, and getting, talking with you.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for the tools that we've got out there. And as you said as well, with regards to the presentation software, especially like Microsoft, it has recording opportunities for you can practice, rehearse, and it will give you feedback. And I think that is
Yeah.
so important to use.
Yeah. There's so many great examples of presentations, mostly on YouTube, and also lots and lots of content on YouTube about, how to ace an interview, or,
Mm.
how to prepare for an interview.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to read or review those.
yeah,
But what I would say is, pick your things, pick and choose.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, Find a presenter who you like and maybe try out one of her things.
yeah,
Don't automatically try to copy her. Find an interview guide and don't slavishly copy it, but pick the things that you think are relevant. And,
yeah.
YouTube is like a giant restaurant
Mm,
of lots of content. And you need to find the bits that you like and find useful and align with your approach.
yeah.
Nobody goes to McDonald's and says, "Can I have one of everything, please?"
No, no.
And so that's a bit like YouTube. Just because there's some so-called expert on YouTube saying, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," you
Yeah,
know, if you think it's good and you like it, fine, go for it. But
yeah.
don't just copy it slavishly, because it might not work your style, it might not work the situation that you're in, it might
No.
not work for the audience.
No, I agree. I have to say, I must admit, I found an awful lot of research, useful content is on TikTok for me
Okay, yeah,
personally.
right.
But I mean that's the thing I've liked about all of the social media platforms. They've all got something to offer and to contribute, even things like Pinterest. And I thought initially, oh my goodness, what would I find on Pinterest? And I was pleasantly surprised that all of them have got their uses. And I think that's one of
Yeah,
the things that
yeah,
I build in, especially like in the workshops, so like using social media for job searching, what you can get out of all of them. And it's not, you're not focusing on posting content, you're looking at how you can use it as a research tool to give
yeah,
you the skills
yeah.
that you need to achieve.
Be
um,
inspired by these things, but don't automatically copy them.
No, totally. Um, but one of the things that I've been asked a lot about in the classroom is about the feedback that you get with the presentation skills. And I've always, sort of said that I can critique them on the presentation of the content. Um, but I'm not a career coach. I'm not I'm not a public speaking person. So I can give you how I feel you've come across with the presentation, and whether it's aesthetically pleasing and stuff like that. We will talk about that. But the actual tips of actually being able to get the feedback on it is obviously as is the key skill. And I think I've
Yeah.
said before, you're the yin and to my yang and stuff like that. How difficult is it for people to try and get some sort of feedback on what they're doing? Because it seems to me a very specialist skill set. So if people are looking for getting that sort of feedback and how they can develop, obviously I know your good self is a key person here, but if people are looking to progress and wanting to achieve those goals, I'm very much about the adult education, further education place. Where can people go to get those skills if they aren't part of the corporate world, if they want to build that skill set more and get the feedback on what they're doing?
Well, so I think there's kind of different levels of feedback. One is, find a friend,
Mm,
and just say, look, I've got this important job interview or presentation coming up. Can you just sit down and let me run through it?
mhm,
So I think that's the simplest method of getting some feedback. And also that's part of your rehearsal process, I would say.
mhm, mhm,
Um, you do some of the feedback in the classroom.
mhm.
I often will use a video camera, so I'll get people to present in front of a camera or a
Yeah.
phone, and then we watch it back together.
Mm,
And so I was in Paris a couple of months ago doing exactly this, and we just got a little tripod and put someone's phone up. People gave their presentations, and then we did the kind of feedback triad. So what would happen is, they'd watch their own presentation and give themselves feedback, and they say, I'd ask them, what do you think went well? What do you think, what areas do you want to improve? So that was step one. Step two is ask the rest of the group, what did you think?
mm,
And then step three is, me coming back with any other comments or whatever.
mm,
Um, the other thing I would say though is, feedback depends a little bit on the existing level of the presenter.
mm,
So one of the people there happened to be the chief exec, was really good at presenting.
mm,
So I kind of pushed him a little harder and said, there's more you could do here. And you are good, but here's some more tips, and gave him some quite advanced tips to present, which were probably not appropriate for some of the others
mm,
who weren't as good. So you've got
mhm.
to tailor your feedback to the level of the person. There's no point me, giving you super duper expert skills if it's only your third ever presentation.
Yeah, that's
You know,
true.
we'll tailor the feedback to your level. And so it's like we'll challenge you to go one level above, not six levels above.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I think the last thing I try to do is the if I'm coaching someone or helping them prepare for a big event, the further away we are from the event when we start the process,
Mm,
I will sometimes be quite mean
mm,
and really push them hard and say, you need to think about this. This didn't go well. Please don't
mm,
forget to face the camera, blah, blah, blah,
mm,
whatever it is.
mm,
As we get closer and closer to the date, I'll kind of tone back,
mm,
because part of what I want to do is actually give them confidence.
mm,
Because the first feedback session will often, they'll go away and they'll think, oh God, oh, I'm terrible, I'm horrible at
mm,
this.
mm,
So the
mm,
closer and closer we get to the actual presentation, generally the more positive feedback I give.
mm. Yeah,
That helps builds people's confidence. So
yeah,
I think, find a friend,
yeah,
video if you can,
yeah.
even if you video yourself, that's good. The feedback triangle is good, and then the closer you get, the more praise you want to give somebody.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad actually. I've been doing a lot of that as well because I do record them. I do record them, and they and share the videos with them. So that's something else that I've
Yeah.
been doing. So oh,
People really hate it. So at this thing I mentioned in Paris, we announced that we were going to do this. There was about 10 or 12 people, and we said, we're going to video you all.
yeah,
And a couple of people said, no, I don't want to do it. It's too embarrassing.
yeah,
One person in particular more or less tried to refuse point blank and had to have a talking to from the boss saying,
yeah,
you're going to do this.
yeah,
But she did it, and she was all right, and she improved. And in fact, she volunteered to do 2 or 3 additional video sessions so she could watch herself get
Yeah.
better. So
Yeah.
it is an embarrassing experience. No one likes looking at themselves, really, unless you're an egomaniac. Um, but what it will do is encourage you and help you understand how you come across.
Yeah, which is also important. It's definitely important. And I think that is something else as well with we're talking about. It's the presenting, it's the communication, it's on how they can improve. And it's not just about the talking, it's not just about the presentation, it's the body language and everything else. So how do you find um how important do you think that verbal and non-verbal communication is important with regards to the communication and getting that presentation across? Do you sort of focus, I suppose obviously when they're videoing themselves, you can see if they fidget and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
do you have sort of strategies on how you help them with that as well, or
Yeah. I mean, everyone has their own little ticks when it comes to presenting, some
mm,
of which are fine, and others, so there's some simple things you can do, which is, when you stand up, put your legs about a shoulder width apart. And that'll ground you and center you, and it'll stop you rocking back and forth, or at
yeah,
least make it harder for you to rock back and forth. So legs maybe slightly further apart than you might normally do. Not ridiculous, but slightly further apart. So that's one thing. The other thing that I was taught early in my career is, remove things like coins or keys in your pocket. And if you're wearing a jacket, then take out any phone or anything like that. Obviously, put your phone on silent.
yeah,
But and then if you say have a lanyard because you're an employee of the company or whatever, take it off.
yeah.
Because what will happen, I don't have one here, but it'll start to kind of flap around as you walk.
Distraction.
Well, it goes back to the single point of focus that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
You want people to focus on either your head or your
yeah,
slides, not
yeah.
your landlord or your
No,
keys jiggling in your pocket.
no, no.
So those things I would, those are really simple tools, and obviously there's many more advanced techniques that you can do. But as a starting point, those are the simplest things, I think.
That's really good, actually. That's really good tips there. So I think I would probably say, is there any other advice that you could give to anybody that wants to improve their presentation skills for public speaking, or if they've been asked to do some public speaking
Yeah.
for a big event that's coming up, but they're at the moment their mind is telling them that they can't do it, even though they should be able to do it. What tips would you have for them
Well, I think we've covered a lot of them. One is the practice tip.
Mm,
Two is the get feedback tip. Um, if you really think you're not the right person, then put your hand up and say, I don't think this is for me.
mm,
Um, and, if you get a chance, find some low risk situations where you can develop your presentation skills.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we've covered most of the main points. I mean, obviously we could spend, 5 hours on this call talking about different tools and techniques, and maybe that's part of a course we might run together.
Oh, it sounds good.
But
It sounds good.
but those are the kind of basic tips, and those kind of what we can cover in half an hour, really.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I love the way you gave a little plug there. Yeah, webinar collaboration. So, guys, if you are interested in building your presentation skills, you've been asked to do a presentation or present a presentation or both parts of it, and you've not done it before, or it's something you really fills you with dread, then put a comment in the chat, because Stephen and I would love to be able to help you. There isn't the last thing we want people is to go into a situation and panic about the challenges that they've got to face. And I think it's knowing who to ask for help when you need it, especially if it is something regarding employment and job related, and being asked to do a presentation. And I know
Yeah.
I've been asked to do presentations on a topic for an interview on more than one occasion. And on more than one occasion, it's been on a topic that I've had no knowledge or experience about and having to deliver. I think one of the best ones I get what new programs would I introduce to a curriculum in adult education? So yeah, there's nothing worse than being asked to present on something that you haven't done for the first time. So if you have got any questions from watching this interview that you would like to put to Stephen or to myself, or more importantly, if you'd like to chat to us in a little bit more detail about what we do, then please put a comment in the on this post when you see it, or reach out to us on social media. You can use our contact email address, which is beinthespotlight@gmail.com. I'm all over YouTube, or with Honey's IT. I'm the host of I work for Honey's IT as well. So if you want to reach out to us, then do drop us a line, and we will be more than happy to help you with your presentation skills and presenting skills and the whole lot in between. So Stephen, if you've got anything else to add to that.
No, this has been a lot of fun and entertaining, and I just reiterate your offer. You're more on social media than me, but I tend to focus on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. But as Sue said, just contact us and we're here to help.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, and not relating to the presentation skills and the workshop there, but have you got anything exciting coming up in your other areas of work that you're happy to share or want to let us know about, that we can follow you on?
Well, I've just got a new client in Spain who
Ooh.
wants a little business simulation on confidence and influencing.
Oh.
So it's a little, we've got a little simulation around influencing skills, which helps people get their point across in a strong way.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's similar to presentation skills, but it's a little bit different. But it's really thinking about the different influencing styles and different approaches that you can take. And this was a model that we've developed and worked with both the Cabinet Office in the UK and the Royal Society of Arts to build. So that's a fun little exercise that I'm looking forward to doing. And luckily for me, it'll be in English rather than Spanish.
Oh, wow. Brilliant. I was going to say, do you speak Spanish?
I can read Spanish and sometimes understand it, but not really speak it. And besides, it's in Catalonia, so they want it in Catalan anyway.
Oh, blimey. Wow. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Well, thank you, Stephen, so much for joining us and being a guest on Being the Spotlight. As I said, anybody, if you've got any questions to ask Stephen, you want to reach out, I'm on all of the social media platforms. You'll find me one place or the other. But if you want to get an email to us, if you send it to beinthespotlight@gmail.com, or if you're watching this on YouTube, put some comments on that. I will pick up the messages and forward them on and respond to you. Okay. Look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy the show. And thank you, Stephen, for being a guest on Being the Spotlight.
And thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Being the Spotlight is the place to be network-driven, discuss technology. Being the Spotlight is the place to be. Tech Talk tips for free.